Most men think silence means the story is over. No calls, no texts, no how are you, nothing. And because nothing is happening, they assume nothing is changing. But that's where they're completely wrong. Because when both of you stop reaching out, the game doesn't end, it changes. This is the stage almost nobody understands. The loudest emotions rarely appear during the conversation. They appear after the conversation disappears. Here's the strange part. When a woman no longer hears from you, she isn't just reacting to your absence. She's reacting to the loss of certainty. The routine she quietly became used to is suddenly gone. And the human mind has an interesting habit. It rarely values what is constantly available. It begins to question what has disappeared. But don't misunderstand this. Silence is not some magic trick. It's not about making someone chase you. It's not about pretending you don't care. Many men completely ruin this phase without even realizing it. Some panic and break the silence too soon. Others play childish games thinking distance alone creates attraction. Both approaches usually fail because the real game isn't happening on your phone. It's happening inside both of your minds. The question is no longer who will text first. The real question is, what is this silence revealing about each of you? Because sometimes silence exposes genuine feelings. Sometimes it exposes wounded pride. And sometimes it quietly reveals that the connection was never as strong as you believed. In this episode, we're going to explore 5 powerful psychological shifts that happen when contacting each other. You'll discover why silence often speaks louder than words. Why many women begin thinking about a man only after the constant communication disappears. Why most men destroy their own chances during this phase. And finally, the one mindset that separates emotionally attractive men from those who panic and lose all their value. So, before you send another text, before you assume she's forgotten you, stay with me until the very end, because once you understand these 5 psychological truths, you'll never see silence the same way again. And the very first point explains why the real game doesn't begin with the last message. It begins with the first day of silence. Silence removes the pressure and reveals the truth. The first thing you need to understand is this. Don't rush to break the silence. Not because you're trying to make her miss you, but because silence reveals something that constant communication never can. The truth. Think about it. When you're texting every day, calling every night, sending memes, checking in, neither of you has much space to actually feel anything. The conversation becomes a routine, and routines are dangerous because people stop appreciating what they always expect. Now, imagine that routine suddenly disappears. No notification, no good morning, no random joke, nothing. For the first few days, both people notice the absence, but they don't respond the same way. Many men become uncomfortable. Their mind starts asking questions. Is she talking to someone else? Did I lose her? Should I text first? That anxiety pushes them to act, not because they have something meaningful to say, but because they want relief from uncertainty. And that's where most men lose, because they're no longer communicating from confidence, they're communicating from fear. Now, let's look at the female perspective. A woman may not immediately reach for her phone either. She may stay silent too. Not because she doesn't care, but because she's trying to understand what the silence means. Was he busy? Did he lose interest? Is he finally focusing on himself? Or is this the first time she has actually felt what life is like without him? This is where female psychology becomes interesting. Many women process emotions internally before expressing them externally. She may not send a message. She may not like your story. She may not call. But that doesn't mean nothing is happening. Sometimes she's simply observing, watching, waiting to see whether your silence is emotional maturity or emotional manipulation. That's an important difference. A mature man doesn't use silence as punishment. He uses it as space. Space to think clearly. Space to regain emotional balance. Space to let reality reveal itself. Because here's the truth. If the connection is genuine, silence doesn't destroy it. It exposes it. If she's genuinely interested, your absence creates curiosity instead of relief. She begins wondering what you're doing, why you've become quiet, whether you've changed. But if the connection existed only because you kept carrying every conversation, silence exposes that too. And while that truth may hurt, it's far better to discover it now than months later. Remember this. Never interrupt silence just because you're uncomfortable. Discomfort is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it's simply the beginning of clarity. And that clarity leads us to the second psychological shift. Because after the silence settles, something unexpected starts happening inside her mind. She begins comparing your absence to your presence. She starts comparing your absence to your presence. Here's the second principle. Don't assume silence means you've been forgotten. In many cases, silence is the first time your value is being measured. Most men think attraction grows during conversations. Sometimes it does, but appreciation often grows during absence. Why? Because the human mind rarely notices what is always available. It notices what suddenly isn't. Think about someone you used to talk to every day. At first, you barely noticed the conversations. They became normal, expected, routine. But the moment those conversations stopped, something changed. The silence became louder than the words ever were. The same thing can happen here. When you're no longer texting her, she's no longer distracted by constant communication. Instead, her mind starts replaying memories, the conversations, the laughs, the moments she felt understood, even the little habits she never paid attention to before. This isn't because she's forcing herself to think about you. It's because the brain naturally compares what it has now with what it had before. But here's where most men make a costly mistake. They can't handle the waiting. After 3 days, maybe 5, they think, she hasn't reached out, I guess she doesn't care. So they send another message just to check in, just to see where things stand. But what they don't realize is every unnecessary message resets the emotional process. The comparison hasn't had time to develop. It's like opening an oven every 2 minutes, then wondering why the food never finishes cooking. Emotions need time, not manipulation, not pressure time. Now let's look at something most men never consider. What if she doesn't contact you either? Does that automatically mean she never cared? No. There are many reasons a woman may stay silent. She may be protecting her pride. She may be waiting to see if your actions match your words. She may be respecting your space. Or she may genuinely believe if he wants to talk, he'll reach out. That's why silence should never be judged by one action alone. Look at the entire pattern. Did she consistently invest before? Did she make time for you? Did she show genuine interest, or were you carrying that connection from the very beginning? Silence answers questions that constant texting hides, and here's another truth. A woman is often paying attention to how you handle silence, not just whether you stay silent. If she senses you're posting stories just to make her jealous, she notices. If you're using mutual friends to get information, she notices. If you're disappearing only to create a reaction, she often notices that too. Confidence doesn't need an audience. A man who is emotionally grounded doesn't spend every day wondering what she's thinking. He asks a different question. Am I becoming the kind of man whose life keeps moving forward with or without anyone's attention? Because that's attractive. Not fake indifference, not emotional games, real emotional stability. And ironically, when you stop obsessing over whether she'll contact you, you become the kind of man who leaves a stronger impression because your identity is no longer tied to one conversation. But silence isn't only revealing your emotional strength, it's revealing hers too. And in the next part, you'll discover the biggest mistake men make during this phase. A mistake that silently destroys attraction even when they never send another text. Before that, if you're finding even a small percentage of value in this episode, subscribe and leave a comment. It helps this video reach someone who genuinely needs to hear it. And if a friend, colleague, or neighbor could benefit from this message, share it with them. The biggest mistake men make during silence. Now, let's talk about the mistake that quietly destroys attraction. And surprisingly, it isn't sending one text. It's something much deeper. The action is simple. Keep living your life. Not as an act not to prove something, but because your life should never stop waiting for one person's decision. Why? Because confidence isn't saying I don't need anyone. Confidence is showing my happiness doesn't depend on one person's attention. There is a huge difference. Many men misunderstand silence. They stop texting, but mentally they're still chasing. Every morning they check her profile. Every hour they wonder if she's online. They analyze every story, every like, every follower, every tiny change. Outwardly, they're silent. Internally, they're desperate. And desperation always finds a way to leak through. Maybe it's through an emotional message a week later. Maybe it's through passive-aggressive posts. Maybe it's through trying to make her jealous. Whatever form it takes, it sends one message. My emotional state depends on your attention. That is exactly what you want to avoid. Instead, fill the silence with purpose. Go to the gym. Build your business. Spend time with people who genuinely value you. Learn something new. Take care of your health. Read, travel, create, grow. Not because she might notice, because you will notice. And when you notice yourself improving, something changes. You stop waiting for validation. You start creating your own. This is one of the strongest psychological shifts a man can experience because women are often attracted to emotional stability, not perfection. Stability. A man who continues building his life even when things are uncertain feels different. He doesn't create pressure. He doesn't beg for reassurance. He doesn't need constant proof that he's important. His actions already answer that question. Now, here's another truth that many men overlook. Sometimes silence doesn't bring two people back together. Sometimes it shows they're growing in different directions. And that's okay because the purpose of silence isn't to force a reunion. It's to reveal reality. If she reaches out because she genuinely misses the connection, you'll know. If she never reaches out, you'll know that too. Both outcomes give you clarity, and clarity is always more valuable than false hope. Remember this, the strongest position you can ever have is not making someone afraid of losing you. It's becoming someone who refuses to lose himself. Because when a man protects his peace, he naturally becomes more attractive, not only to women, but to everyone around him. And that leads us to the final psychological shift. Because after enough time has passed, silence stops being a test of patience. It becomes a mirror. And what that mirror reveals may completely change the way you look at relationships forever. Silence reflects the truth. Now we've reached the point almost nobody talks about because after enough time passes, silence stops being about her. It starts becoming about you. Here's the action. Use silence to evaluate the relationship, not just to wait for the next message. Ask yourself difficult questions. Was she truly investing, or was I doing all the work? Did she make me feel peaceful or constantly anxious? Was I loved for who I was, or was I always trying to earn her attention? These questions matter because many men don't actually miss the woman. They miss the routine, the habit, the hope, the fantasy of what the relationship could have been. And there's a huge difference. Why? Because the mind hates uncertainty. When someone disappears from your daily life, your brain naturally remembers the highlights, the laughter, the chemistry, the good conversations. But it quietly ignores the inconsistency, the mixed signals, the sleepless nights, the emotional confusion. That's why silence can be deceptive. It can make you romanticize someone who wasn't actually right for you. This is where emotionally mature men separate themselves from everyone else. They don't ask, how do I get her back? They ask, is this relationship actually healthy for both of us? That single question changes everything because suddenly your focus shifts. You're no longer trying to win someone. You're trying to understand whether the connection deserves another chance. And that mindset is powerful. Now let's look at female psychology. A woman can often sense when a man is emotionally centered. She notices when he isn't forcing conversations. She notices when he respects himself enough not to chase certainty. That doesn't mean she'll immediately come back, and that's not the goal. The goal is something much bigger. To become a man whose emotional state isn't controlled by another person's choices. Ironically, that's the version of you that creates the deepest respect. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you've stopped making your happiness dependent on one outcome. And here's something most people never realize. Sometimes the silence changes her too. She begins looking back at the relationship differently. She remembers your patience, your consistency, the way you made her feel safe, things she barely noticed when you were always available. Distance has a strange way of creating perspective. But whether she reaches that realization is no longer your responsibility. Your responsibility is to become stronger than your uncertainty. Because the moment you stop trying to control another person's emotions, you finally regain control of your own. And that brings us to the final lesson. The lesson that determines whether silence becomes the beginning of a stronger relationship or the beginning of a stronger version of yourself. The real victory was never the text message. So, here we are. The final lesson, and it's probably the most important one. Most men believe this story ends with one question. Will she contact me? But that's the wrong question. The better question is, who have I become while waiting for the answer? Because that's what silence has been testing all along, not your patience, your identity. Here's the action. Never let your self-worth depend on whether one person comes back. Why? Because your value was never created by her attention, and it will never disappear because of her silence. Think about that. If one text can make you feel like the happiest man alive, and one unanswered message can make you question your worth, then your confidence was never really yours. It belonged to someone else. That's a dangerous place to live. Real confidence is different. It stays steady whether someone chooses you, questions you, or even walks away from you. That's the kind of strength people can feel without you saying a word. Now, here's something fascinating about female psychology. Many women are drawn to men who create peace, not pressure. A man who respects himself, who doesn't chase, who doesn't beg, who doesn't disappear to manipulate, but who also isn't afraid to walk away from situations that no longer serve him. That kind of emotional balance is rare, and rare things are remembered. Will every woman come back? No. And anyone who promises that is selling you a fantasy. Some relationships are meant to continue. Others are meant to teach you something. Silence simply reveals which one you're living. If she reaches out, don't reward her with desperation. Reward her with the same calm confidence you've been building. Take your time. Listen. Observe. See whether her actions match her words, because healthy relationships aren't rebuilt by one emotional conversation. They're rebuilt through consistent effort from both people. And if she never reaches out, don't see that as proof you weren't enough. See it as proof that clarity has finally arrived. You no longer have to chase mixed signals. You no longer have to wonder where you stand. You have your answer. And believe it or not, that's freedom. Remember, the strongest man in the room isn't the one who always gets the girl. It's the one who never loses himself trying to keep someone who isn't choosing him. So, if silence has entered your life, don't fear it. Use it. Let it teach you. Let it strengthen you. And let it reveal the truth about her, about the relationship, and most importantly, about yourself. If this episode gave you a new perspective, even just one insight you can carry with you, subscribe and become part of this community. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever experienced a period of silence that completely changed a relationship? Your story might help someone else who's going through the same thing. Until next time, stay calm, stay patient, and never forget the real game was never about who sends the next text. It was always about who grows the most during the silence.